Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. My name is Henrik Nolmark, and I'm really delighted to open this webinar and welcome you all to this webinar that we call a Design Framework Mobility Hubs for Women and Caregivers. And we're eager and excited to share the work that we've been doing in this project for 1.5 years. It's been a privilege to work with the team, of course, but also to learn from many key leaders working on mobility justice, gender inequalities, and caregiver travel. But also, most importantly, to hear the stories and experiences from the women and caregivers that we have met in our dialogues, both in the US and in Sweden. While we couldn't have everyone involved in the project on the call today, we thank them deeply. And we have our core team here to introduce themselves in a minute. But I'll hand over to my co-host, Hannah Wilson at SumSea. Please, Hannah.
Yeah, hi. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. We really appreciate. We're thrilled to have you here. We have people from all over the world, which is really exciting. So just to give you an idea of today's session, we'll include a brief presentation to share our work from my colleagues Benji and Natalia that you'll hear from. We'll move into a discussion with our panelists, Brytanee and Jessica, who we're thrilled to have. And throughout the webinar, we'll have some polls and some prompts in the chat for you. So really, we hope that this is an active discussion with you all. We want you to be able to be involved and share your experiences. And with that, we ask and hope that you show up today not only as your professional self, but also as your personal self and your own personal experiences. This tool is really about designing for real people and our very real needs and how we move around. So we encourage you, those of you who identify with these principles and the personas that you may have seen in the design framework already, to take space in today's webinar and really share your experiences. So we'll provide some opportunity for that. And then we also just wanted to thank you all for taking the time to attend this webinar during a time that you may be feeling particularly some personal and political difficulties in the US. And we hope that this is a time that we can serve as a safe space to talk about the importance of transportation equity and empowering you all as designers and planners and advocates and researchers to continue the work of centering all marginalized communities. So we'll share just a quick bit about us and then introduce the rest of the team, and then we'll get into the presentation. So if Karen, you want to flip to the next slide. So this was a collaborative project, to say the least. We've got a big team online here, and not everyone that was involved is even able to be here today. But it was a project between SumSea and Living Cities and Communities. SumSea is a national or international nonprofit based in the US, and our mission is to connect and equip change leaders, advancing people-centered shared mobility systems to fight climate change, advance equity, and strengthen communities. I'll pass it to Henrik.
Yeah, and Living Cities and Communities, the other partner in the project, it's a Swedish micro enterprise working quite a lot internationally as well. We see ourselves as a knowledge-based company offering support and partnership in strategy, analysis, communication, idea development, but also co-learning and co-design. Quite often on city development, local and regional development and placemaking, but we're also working in some other fields like cultural heritage. So we are so grateful for our funders of this project. So that's the Future Mobility Program, supported by the Vinnova, the Swedish Innovation Agency. So that's the initiation of the project was a call, an open call for funding of projects to collaborate between organizations and companies in the US and in Sweden. But we also got co-funding, Hannah.
Yeah, so I also really want to thank the Equitable Transportation Fund. That's a project of the Global Philanthropy Partnership for their additional match funding for this project. So thank you very much to our funders.
Yeah, and with that, I think we should let all the members of the team introduce themselves. So I go clockwise on my screen. So the next person to my right is Benjamin, please.
Hi, good morning or good afternoon, everyone. I'm Benjamin de la Peña or Benji, and I have the privilege of leading the Shared Use Mobility Center team.
Thank you. And next is Natalia.
Thanks, Henrik. I'm Natalia Perez Bobadilla. I'm a research communication specialist in the Shared Use Mobility Center, and I was part of this research project.
Thank you. And next comes Abby.
Hi there, I'm Abby. I'm a program associate at the Shared Use Mobility Center based in our Chicago office.
Thank you, Abby. And over to Karin. You're muted, Karin.
I think I'm on now. Hi, I'm Karin
Yes.
Hendrickson, and I work with communications and strategic foresight for living cities and communities, and I've been part of this project.
Thank you, Karin. Over to Marie.
Yes, hello. I'm saying hello from Gothenburg, Sweden. I work at the University of Gothenburg as associate professor in peace and development research. Thank you.
Yeah, and Marie has been part of the Living Cities and Communities team in the project. We also had Nicolina Ullgren, part of the team, but Nicolina has a severe flu today, so she asked me to send her greetings to all of you. And I think she's joining the webinar, but not being having her audio on because of the flu. And we also have 2 invited speakers for this webinar. So maybe you want to just briefly say hello, and then we will introduce you properly when it's time for your discussion part. So Brytanee, please.
Hi, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone. Brytanee Brown, founder and principal of Emergent Labs. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Brytanee. And Jessica?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Jessica Alba with Stanford Transportation. And yeah, we'll learn more about me in a little bit. Oh,
Thank
I should
you,
also
Jessica.
mention that I'm also on the advisory board for Future Mobility. So I've been involved in the selection of this project and also been following along as it's been developing. And it's been fantastic to be part of the process.
Thank you, Jessica. And you've been our supportive mentor as well from the Future Mobility Program. Yeah, Hannah, before we leave the word to Benji, we had some housekeeping. So should I go through that perhaps?
Sure, yeah, go for
Yeah.
it.
So just some heads up. First, there will be a Menti. After the presentations, there will be a Menti. So please keep your phones ready for that Menti. There will be 3 questions, and that will be introduced by Karin after the presentation. Second thing, we encourage you, of course, to use the chat for sharing your experiences of moving around in mobility environments and transportation environments, but we also invite you to share good design solutions in the chat. And for the discussion, there's a specific Q&A function. So if you want to pose questions to Brytanee and Jessica and to the team, please use the Q&A function, and you have all the information in the chat as well. So with that, I think we're ready to go.
Yeah.
So floor is yours, Benji. You're the first presenter. We have Benji and then Natalia, and Benji is having the first introduction.
Thank you very much. Again, I'm Benji. My pronouns are he, him. I'm Filipino, but currently based in Chicago. Let's go to the next slide, Karen. So first, the question we asked was, why mobility hubs? Why did we do this project? If you're in the transportation world, this is kind of the term du jour now. After we went through shared mobility, it's like, we need to build mobility hubs. And transportation planners, urban planners, engineers imagine these as places where you can shift one transportation node to another. It could be from bus to train, or train to bike, to shared bike, to pick up a TNC or a ride hail or a car share. So it's a physical location, and it makes all of these options much more visible and easier to find, where they used to just exist on your phone. And so these are very physical places. But as we studied this, we couldn't find any research. So there's been a lot of papers written about Mobility Hub. No research on how these could work better for women and caregivers. Next slide, please. Next slide, Karen. All right. So that got us to thinking, really, is why women and caregivers? Well, based on excellent research from people like Sarah Kaufman at NYU and ITDP, what we've learned is women and caregivers travel very differently. They do more short trips, trip chaining, trips within the neighborhood or the next neighborhood. And yet the way we've designed our public transport infrastructure in most cities is their hub and spoke, and everything heads to downtown. Even our bus systems primarily serve these, what we call peak commuter times, and they don't serve women and caregivers. So as we thought about it, we asked, could mobility hubs serve the kinds of trips and concerns and chores that women and caregivers do? Next slide, please. So what we did was, we did a background research, but we also talked to real people. We listened to the women and caregivers. We held focus groups, both in Sweden and in the US, and we heard their concerns. And the concerns could be grouped into kind of these 7 areas: personal security, convenience, comfort, physical accessibility, care, health, and safety, and total affordability. Next slide, please, Karen. And what we came away with is that mobility hubs are civic places, right? They're places first, and they connect people. So it's less about the transportation modes, although they're very important. It's more about the place. And a mobility hub needs to be adaptable and responsive. It's a space that's responsible and adaptable, and it needs to respond to the changing needs of the community through the seasons, and what is important to the members of the community. At the core, mobility hubs are human places in shared community space. Next slide, please. And to get to this design exercise, we used personas, which is a usual tool in design. Personas, they're fictional, but they're actually composites of the people we met and talked to. And we imagine they represent the women and caregivers we meet in our communities. They could be strangers, they could be neighbors, they're your friends, they're your family. And as we know I have the privilege of speaking as a man, and I'm glad that the panel here is majority women, but as we know, they give us very, very wise advice from lived experiences. So using personas allowed us to have empathy, and they reminded us that the design of mobility hubs needs to work for people, not just ideas. Just a little bit of background, as we looked at all of the research, it was very much about this mode, that mode, this design, but very little about the people who actually should use mobility hubs. Next slide, please. The other that became very clear to us was there were the, shall we say, engineering mechanical issues, but there are also unspoken themes and that recognize what is unrecognized labor and emotional labor that women and caregivers have to do, right? And do. And so those are, we identified with the women we talked to, these labors that should go into your consideration as you think about mobility hubs, right? The labor of weaving, and that's connecting to kin and friends, or connecting to parts of the city, the fabric of the city, or to the community, or to your daily needs, or to amenities, right? Or the labor of hosting, which is making people feel welcome, or building familiar and personal relationships, right? Of being good neighbors, or being a place for celebration, marking of the seasons, right? There's the labor of nurturing and enabling, right? Which is helping and assisting, teaching, informing, making things easier, empowering or supporting. The labor of safeguarding, of protecting, of stewarding, of assisting. And then the labor of mending, and that's responding to hurts, comforting, fighting wrongs, or keeping the peace and amending injustice. These are through the design framework. They don't get called out as categories, and they cross the categories. So you will see that. And as you think about your own projects, think about this kind of labor that women and caregivers mostly are responsible for. Next slide. So the main idea is, if we center the needs of women and caregivers, if we design and build and operate mobility hubs, we can make the transportation system work better for everyone, including the most vulnerable people in our communities. And with that, I'll entertain questions later. Let me pass it on to my colleague, Natalia, who will walk you through the personas and the principles.
Thank you, Benji. Thank you for that. Yeah, I can just talk about the 7 personas and the 7 design principles that we developed. Just repeating a bit of what Benji shared with us. We paired these personas and their needs, which are fictional but are inspired by the thoughts, needs that women themselves shared with us during focus groups and interviews. And so these 7 principles and personas should serve as an inspiration more than a prescription. And let's go to learn more about them. Next slide, please. So the first persona is Nalaya. She's in her early 30s, and she travels to and from the suburbs and work daily. She feels like she constantly needs to be on guard and can't relax. So the design principle that we can think of is trust and security, and ask ourselves, how can we make the mobility hub a place that fosters trust, and a place where women and caregivers can feel safe and secure? How does that look like? The next slide is Rina. Rina is in her 70s, and she used to take transit, but the service doesn't always work for her now. She needs these places to be easy to get to, and the services to be reliable. For her, we paired the design principle of convenience. So how can we make the mobility hub a place that is easy to get to and has reliable services, and it's, for example, free of clutter? The next persona, please. The next inspiration is from Anissa. She's in her mid-20s. She works as a caregiver for a 60-year-old patient, and she needs a place where she feels that it's comfortable and clean, where she can sit down and rest if needed to. And for Anissa, we want to design for comfort. So how can we make the mobility hub a place where it is pleasant to wait and easy to transfer from one mode to another? The next persona, please. It's Larissa. She's in her mid-40s, and she gets around on a wheelchair. She needs the hub to be accessible, with, for example, elevators which are reliable, and take away obstacles when she needs to move around. For her, we designed for access and ease of use. How can we make the mobility hub a place where it's easy to move around, especially for people with physical challenges? The next persona, please, it's Nedi. She's in her 30s, and she's traveling with her toddler. As a caregiver, she also has to do groceries in her day-to-day trips. She wishes these places were welcoming for mothers and their kids, and to anyone really. Sometimes she doesn't feel like she belongs in these places. So how can we design for care and belonging? How can we make the mobility hub a place where everyone feels welcome and anyone can find help whenever they need it? Next, please. Alba is in her 40s. She takes care of her 80-year-old son and also an aging mother. She'd like to keep her family safe against fast cars and air pollution. For her, we want to design for safety and health. So how can we make the Mobility Hub a clean and healthy place where children, elders, and people who care for them can be safe? Next, please. Lastly, we have Mika. Mika is a teenager who is out with their friends a lot, but on a tight budget. They wish there were cheaper options for food and entertainment, places to hang out. For Mika, we thought of designing options and affordability. So how can we make the Mobility Hub a place with different and flexible options, not just for travel, but also for food, shopping, and enjoyment? So now let's have a quick look at a poll. So let's hear from you on the next part of this presentation.
Yes, let's go over to 3 questions, and we will start with this one.
So for those of you not familiar with Menti, feel free to, on your computer or on your phone, you can type in menti.com and then put in the code that you see there. Will also, it's just dropped in the chat so you can see it a little easier there too. And we just want to get a sense for who is with us today.
Numbers keep coming in.
Quite a few from the private sector.
Yeah. Well, this gives us a nice picture of who's with us today. Thank you for sharing. We still have some more coming in, so let's just give it a few more seconds before we move on to the next question.
Yeah, we're almost 100 participants today, so
yeah, and nice to see in the chat where everyone's from. I'm seeing Washington, California, all over, Massachusetts, Alabama, Denver. Great.
Okay. I hope that everyone who wants to answer have done so, and we're moving on to the next question. I'm going to start it up. Sorry. I'm sorry. Just give me a second.
If you're in the Menti, you should see the next screen pop up on your phone or your browser. So I see people are already entering it in. I love these word clouds. They get me every time.
Yeah, they do. Always fascinating.
Yeah. That's great.
Yeah, and we recognize the themes that's been with us during the project for sure.
yes.
Each and every one.
Yeah.
But there's quite a variety here.
Yeah.
Many words.
Yeah.
Safety, equity, women mobility, placemaking comes up, accessibility, inclusivity, and inclusion.
And caregivers is growing.
Yeah. See inclusive design.
Gap filling. Designing for differences.
Women's spaces.
Yeah. Empathetic design, intentional design.
Gender diversity. I see also mobility hubs in the top left corner of my screen here.
Yeah. Okay, let's see. I think we're ready to move on to the next one. And let's hope that everything is... No, I'm sorry. I have to.
Okay, yeah, you should have the next one on your screen as well if you've been participating.
Oh, have the unspoken themes, design principles we've shared made you think of a transportation site area that could benefit from this guiding and thinking? This needs perhaps a bit more time to both consider and also to write. You have 200 characters, so there's some space.
Yeah, if any spaces come to mind, and if you want to share, just explain briefly what you think could be improved, what makes you think of these
all
spaces.
transit centers.
And in case you have illustrations, you can also share that in the chat. If you have anything you'd like to share, you can post it in the chat.
Entrances surrounding areas of parks. Yeah, I can imagine. Have a mobility hub site where we are working on, and we have emphasized components such as restroom access and space for food trucks, so it's helpful to see these themes in the report. That's nice to hear. I'm scrolling through slow here, and if you are on Menti, you can scroll on your phone screen too. Village hubs,
I like
district
this
centers.
schools and parks. I think that's a space that we don't often think of and as a mobility hub per se. That's why we kind of left it open to transportation area. I like that one.
Senior housing.
Yep, spaces near parks and healthcare services, food access points.
Yeah, and the climate is an aspect, of course, too, as in this example, we see that here now.
And thank you, Mitch, for dropping something in the chat there. Feel free, if others have designs or spaces that they want to share, feel free to drop that in as well.
It's really nice to see all your examples.
Yeah, we'd love to use these as we continue to share about this tool and use these spaces and locations to share with the rest of the community.
I think, yeah, here's another one. What do you think? Do you think we are happy with these answers and that we should move on?
Yeah, thank you so much for
Okay.
your participation, everyone.
Yeah, so I'll stop the screen share. Thank you.
Great. So Henrik, we'll move into our discussion with our panelists, with Brytanee and Jessica. So thank you so much, Brytanee and Jessica, for joining us on this session. Brytanee and Jessica both have been involved in the project in different ways. So it's really lovely to have them come back. Brytanee was helping us to host some workshops as a team. And Jessica was our mentor of the project. So I'll start by introducing Brytanee. It's been so lovely to work with her. So I'll introduce her and then pass it to Henrik to introduce Jessica. But if you're not familiar with Brytanee, she is the founder and principal of Emergent Labs, a design studio and strategy consultancy working at the intersection of urban planning, culture, and mobility. She's led transformative initiatives that center community needs and secure funding for equity-driven transportation projects. Her work bridges government, nonprofit, private sectors, ensuring historically marginalized communities shape the decisions that impact them. Through Emergent Labs, she collaborates with partners to create people-centered mobility solutions, transportation infrastructure, and community-driven engagement strategies. A McNair Scholar, Bay Area native, and granddaughter of Gwendolyn Leggett, Brytanee is currently thinking about collective care, feeding her entrepreneurial spirit, and taking care of her plants. It's been so lovely to work with her. Her voice and expertise has been really, really an asset to the team. So I'll let Henrik introduce Jessica before we get into the discussion.
Thank you, Hannah. Well, Jessica, this is just a short version of your very long bio. You've done a lot of things in your professional lives, but you over the past 2 decades, you consulted and advised on hundreds of projects and policy efforts in the sustainable and emerging mobility realm. Jessica oversees Stanford University's award-winning transportation demand management program, represents and supports the institution on transportation policy matters. Prior to Stanford, she was a principal at Nelson Nygaard Consulting Associate and started her career at Trivector Traffic, which is nice for me to see because that's a small organization company in the south of Sweden. Two thought leaders on transportation solutions that put people first. She's a trusted board member of San Francisco Bay Ferry and the Association for Commuter Transportation. Jessica is also advisory board co-chair for the Future Mobility Initiative, as you heard before, the program or the initiative that supported this project, catalyzing research and innovation collaboration within sustainable mobility between the US and Sweden. And as a mentor of this project, you've helped us, you've given us feedback and input, and especially in the design phase when we entered into that formulation of the design framework, it was very helpful to have exchange with you. So very welcome.
Thank you.
So who's going first, Hannah? I lost track of the run of show.
Yeah, I think we can, we wanted to start with just giving Brytanee and Jessica an opportunity to say a few words, introduce themselves as well. So maybe Brytanee, we could start with you.
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. Happy to be here. Hannah gave a pretty thorough intro. The only thing that I would add is being able to be a part of the project, providing that strategic advising was, it was incredible. And I think I'm really excited to talk more about the work, Women and Caregivers as a persona, as a design framework means a lot to me. So I'm just excited to be here and start the conversation. And I'll pass it over to Jessica.
Yeah, I think Henrik did a really good job too. It's fantastic to be here and to have been involved in this project. I grew up in Sweden and moved here in 2004, so a little more than 20 years now, and I have lived here in the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area. And what I especially love about this project is how we created this collaborative space through Future Mobility and the Vinnova grant and support. And that it's a Swedish-US initiative, but this is totally a global product, and that we can use in any project across any kind of jurisdiction or country. And so I love that it's all encompassing and so focused on heart-led design and really thinking about the users and making this not this mobility hub or this transit center not just about moving people, but rather recognizing the space that we're in. And let me see if there was anything else that I wanted to add. Yeah, so I'll put a link in the chat to Future Mobility if you're interested in learning more about that effort as well.
Thank you so much, Jessica and Brytanee. So I think just to kick things off, we wanted to ask you all from your perspectives as researcher, as practitioner, as policy expert, what are the challenges that you are seeing today, and how might this tool help designers and planners and researchers in this work? And whoever wants to jump in, go ahead.
You want to go first, Brytanee?
Sure, I'll go first. I spent a lot of time thinking about this question because it's such an interesting question and an important question. So I'll start, and Jessica, perhaps you and I can kind of riff. One thing that's come up for me with this question is rising housing costs. I think people who rely on transit as a part of their daily lives are being pushed further from their core communities, forcing longer commutes, more complicated commutes, and burdensome travel patterns. Meanwhile, transit disinvestment in cities means that the very communities that have historically depended on public transportation are left with fewer choices, and as we all know, deteriorating service. And so this is the tension, right? People are being displaced into transit inaccessible areas, while the places they're leaving behind are losing transit investment altogether. And on top of all of this, transportation has historically prioritized regional connectivity, right? So helping people commute between cities. So there is that conundrum, right? We've done an okay job, I guess, at connecting people regionally. That has been our focus, this regional connectivity. But I think we've lost the intra-community level travel patterns. We get people to the job centers, we connect them to rapid transportation into highways, but we really don't think about how people move in their communities. And I think active transportation, bike and pedestrian infrastructure, although we don't always get that right, is one of the solutions and the mechanisms in how we address that intra-community travel. But that's also becoming, it's underfunded, and we're experiencing funding cuts there as well too. So I think that there's, for me, definitely affordability, lack thereof, displacement, and dislocation of community from the resources and services that they need. That's, to me, right now, one of the biggest challenges today. And then as far as how mobility hubs address this and why I'm so passionate and interested in mobility hubs as a framework, I think that we've done in the Bay Area, and I think as the concept has grown and needs to be applied to a local context, we've thought about how a mobility hub can provide that regional connectivity, right? Better connect people to job centers, but then also think about how they can connect people to community. And so I think that's the opportunity here with the mobility hub, is that it addresses both the intra-community level travel and the regional connectivity for, dare I say, historically disinvested communities. So I'll pass it off to Jessica.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful, Brytanee. I think many of us know that women and caretakers and caregivers are also trip chaining a lot more than those who just commute to work and commute home, and then that's it. So 2 trips versus a mother who is the primary caregiver for children and elderly to a much larger extent, and having to do the grocery shopping and taking the kids to their dentist appointment and all of that. And it's really hard to make that work unless you own a car. And in order for us to make that work better, we need better mobility hubs. We need better spaces where people can come and spend 10 minutes between 2 buses, or before hopping in an Uber that arrives, or whatever the need is at that moment. And creating these spaces that it's both recognized as a mobility hub by design, branding, and the intermodal aspects of it. In addition to that, we have this sense of belonging, and it's a space where you recognize yourself. You feel at home and safe and welcomed. And so, sure, we need to brand our mobility hubs so that it's easy to understand that that's what you're in, that kind of space that you're in. But we should also make sure that they're connected to the fabric that we're in, the district that we're in, and that you have the opportunities to rest, do some small grocery shopping, maybe if there's a farmer's market component, etc., or picking up a piece of jewelry for a good friend whose birthday is coming up, and there's this local person who has made these jewelry right then and there. And so I completely agree with Brytanee that there's this bigger complicated or the regional aspect, but there's also this opportunity to really make it a local hub and meeting place in order to facilitate all of these kinds of trips that need to be made in a day.
Yeah, I think,
and not just commuter oriented, right? So that it's not just a coffee shop that's open between 7 and 9 or 7 and 10 in the morning, and the food truck that might be there, at the end of the day, but rather that we create these spaces and where people want to spend time.
yeah, I think both of what you guys said really makes me think about the labor of weaving. And weaving is such a, I don't know, it's a really cool word that it has, it really invokes kind of an image. And I think that intra-connectivity that you mentioned, Brytanee, the local aspect of what you said, Jessica, that many women and caregivers are engaging with on a regular basis, is what we want to be thinking about, and how we can develop these spaces to have that weaving in mind. And that can be, very, very local community feel, and the people that they engage with through their, to support their families and to support their needs. So I really like both of those.
Yeah. And I think one thing that we,
I just want to, go ahead, Jessica.
So creating spaces for, in this case, what we call women and caregivers and anyone with a disability. It's not like we're eliminating the space for anyone else. We're just enriching the space for everyone. So having women and caregivers as our base for these spaces, we're enriching that space for everyone.
Yeah, and go ahead, Henrik. You were next.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment also on something you said, Brytanee, about you mentioned about the lack of resources or the restrictions on putting resources into things like this. That's something we experienced in many different areas of urban development in recent years. But I think with these design principles, one of the key aspects is also that you can do a lot with almost no additional resources. You can do a lot without investing in expensive infrastructure or assets or so, by just caring for the environment, caring for the local place, and thinking about this belonging, sense of community, sense of belonging, doesn't necessarily need a lot of money to create. So I think also that's something very, very important. Just wanted, so back to you, Brytanee.
Yeah, I mean, I know that, yeah, Jessica, you mentioned in terms of this piece around by offering this as a framework and centering women and caregivers, that there could be a perception or a red flag that goes up in someone's mind that we are forgetting certain communities or excluding certain communities. And I want to just raise that we're going to get into personas. I'm going to talk about my persona that I resonate with the most, but this piece around in planning and in dominant transportation planning, the white male, cisgendered, able-bodied, that's our dominant persona. So we do have personas in transportation planning and research and design. So this is actually including more personas into that conversation. So it's actually adding and not taking away from anything. And so, Jessica, thank you for raising that, because I do think it could be in the back of some folks' minds, probably not everybody's mind, but it could be a question for some folks in the audience or who have come across this framework. So thank you for saying that and allowing us to be explicit and upfront in the beginning.
Yeah, and maybe that's a good segue. You kind of touched on it, Brytanee. Of course, if you want to expand on it, absolutely. But the next question we did want to ask is on the methodology. We have a couple questions, because I think the project, the mobility hubs is a tool that we can use to get out these principles, right? It's one framework that we can leverage, but what we really wanted to drive home was the methodology behind the project, that we are thinking about the people, right? And not just the things, not just kind of checking off the box that you've added these things to your mobility hub, but who are the people that you're serving and what are their needs? What are their feelings in that space? So that's what we hope this tool helps with, is to center those people, use personas, ask questions more than checking off things. So I guess, yeah, just wanted to ask you guys why you feel it's important to have personas in our design work. And yeah, again, Brytanee, you kind of started talking about that, but feel free to expand, or Jessica, if you want to start.
Yeah, Jessica, I feel like I went first on the first question, even though I segued us in. I feel like I want to, yeah, go ahead, start us off.
Yeah, to be honest, I've never worked with personas. And so when I got involved in the project and really got to see the fruits of your labor, and get some insight into how these personas came about and how I can relate to every single one of them, I think that's why we use personas, because it gives us this deep opportunity to relate and think outside our own body, our own means, our own daily journey, and recognize that, oh my gosh, the space that I just designed is horrible for this person or this persona. And what can I do better? Can I go back to this project, or can I do better in the next project that I work on? If I work for a public agency, who are the partners that I need to work with in order to think outside of my box? And having these personas simplifies that and facilitates that kind of discussion.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Thank you. yes, that piece around revealing blind spots and personas really call for, I think, in my opinion, deeper engagement. And they push planners, practitioners, designers beyond infrastructure, right? And kind of force us to see how people actually move, how they navigate challenges, make decisions every day. And so just to build off of what you said, Jessica, I plan for my grandmother who lived in South Berkeley. And I think about like her Saturday trip to the grocery store or for shopping, for food shopping. And she didn't just go to one grocery store. She had to go to Pack and Save. So if you're from the Bay Area, you might be familiar with Pack and Save. You could access it on the 72 bus line. And for us, when I would join her, which was fun, we get on the bus and we take the bus to Pack and Save. And if we didn't have a grocery cart, and so we take a cab to get back home, right? Because we had too many bags to carry, right? She's cooking for 5, 6, 7, maybe 10 people at any given time. So we had a lot of groceries. And so when we could afford it, we take a cab. When we couldn't, it would be a very cumbersome, precarious trip. And so I think about mobility hubs from that context. She liked to go to the meat market because that was the most affordable place to get her meat. She didn't get her meat from Pack and Save. She went to the meat market. So that meant we had to wait for my mom to get off work. And then she would take us to the local meat market, right? Because there was no carrying frozen meat on the bus. So when I think about a mobility hub, it has that level of complexity and nuance. It thinks about, maybe it's a kiosk that allows you to rent a grocery cart. Maybe there's live music that is playing while someone is waiting. There's a play structure for children. But it takes transportation and adds that, like I said, that nuance and that complexity. So that's my persona who I think there's overlap across the personas in this framework. That my grandmother is my transportation mobility hub persona. So just wanted to share that and open the conversation back up.
Yeah, and I realized as you started, Brytanee, that there's one more aspect of the personas that when we do the community outreach and when we're discussing with stakeholders and the neighbors around this future mobility hub, having these personas also grounds the work and provides a foundation to discuss around. Are we missing a persona? Something that is not reflected right now that we know is a core component of this district that we're in. And if we're, depending on the personas that we're focusing on, I'm super excited about the opportunity to bring this kind of thinking into the community process.
Thank you. We had a couple of other perhaps methodological questions, and one is about the what we call them the ethos or unspoken themes that was one of the slides Benji dwelled on a bit, showing how that it wasn't there from the beginning of the project. We didn't have that as a point of departure. It was something that we realized from over time that we have these unspoken things that we need to take into account. So our question to you is how ethos or unspoken themes can help guide thinking and feelings in the design process. Perhaps making it less mechanical as a design process or less rational, perhaps, and broadening your mind. Do you have any comments on that? So who goes first this time? Is it back to Brytanee?
It might be. I'll take it.
Yeah. We have more questions. That will be Jessica goes first, right? So
Okay.
this one is Brytanee goes first.
Sounds good. I think the thing that comes to mind for me, and the ethos or the unspoken theme that stood out to me the most was safeguarding, and this piece around protection, right? And being a woman and feeling unsafe in certain spaces, particularly transit, public transportation spaces. Well, they're not, they could be not well lit. And a project and an initiative that stands out to me, and I highly encourage everyone to look into it, is the Not One More Girl initiative in the Bay Area. And they did a really extensive study with gender nonconforming, women and gender expansive youth around safety and transportation, and worked in this way that allowed safety to be addressed, but also recognize that police and police presence is not always the equivalent of safety. And so I think this element of safeguarding and weaving it in this like unspoken theme of feeling safe, but also feeling like the protector of people as a woman and as a woman of color, right? Too, I know that if I implicate police into, and I'm building police into into our transportation solutions, that it could have negative consequences for communities. At the same time, the reality is that people still feel unsafe. So how do we reconcile that? And I think that, and I see, thank you, Hannah, for dropping that in the chat, and Kim Walton, I see your comment as well too. But yeah, just that piece around safety stands out to me as well, and the complicated nature of it, particularly for women of color. So I'll open it up.
Yeah, I just wish that anyone in the planning field or design, construction, engineering start by embracing these kinds of ethos, right? That we're not just putting asphalt on the ground or tracks down, where we're creating these spaces. And so I think anything we can do in the transportation space to humanize the space is so important. And I've never thought of these different labors of weaving, hosting, nurturing, enabling, and safeguarding. But they're so, I think it's so deep. And so I really appreciate that you're lifting this out. And I think this should be applied way beyond mobility hubs, because the more in tune with the reality of how people move we can get, the better. And so just recognizing that these aren't blank slates, blank walls. These are spaces with music and different textures and feelings and sensations and light and connection. And I think the team has brought these ethos together. It's fabulous. I think it needs to be celebrated way beyond just this product.
Yeah, I think about, I'm sure many of you know, like walk audits are often a tool that people are urging, leaders of cities to do on a regular basis, or audits of transit systems. And I think those are so powerful because, we are sensory beings, and you're only able to experience things, when you're physically placed there and really able to feel, right? And that's, I think, the biggest thing that the unspoken themes help try to lift up, is that as designers, how can we, think about the feelings that and feel those for ourselves in those spaces, so that we're designing for those needs.
Mm-hmm.
I think just shifting a little bit more to a more practical, question, thinking about the tool itself. And we just want to reiterate to everyone on the online here today that This is an open source tool. We encourage you to use it and take slides and use it in your everyday work. And so I wanted just to help the audience understand or think about how they might use it. If you, Brytanee or Jessica, in your work or in work that you know of going on, how might you envision actually using this tool in practice?
Yeah. What I will personally do is make sure that, so working at Stanford, it's so much of being on the Stanford University campus is about moving by foot and bike. And again, I think this what you've created is not only applicable to mobility hubs, but really creating vibrant spaces. And we have several mobility hubs. So what I will do is share it with everyone involved in these kinds of projects. And beyond that, I think I will use this for years to come. I think it's a living document. We can make improvements to it if needed, but it's something that I can bring with me on whatever project I'm working on, and no matter who I'm talking to, that we should always think beyond just, the physical product and really think about the spaces that we create. Yeah, I'll bring it to the other organizations that I'm involved into.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, how I'm thinking about using it. One, just printing it out and having it available at my desk because it's so beautiful. And it's visionary. It's futurist. It's something that it's a world that I don't think exists quite yet, or we don't see as often. And so as a practitioner, it's just really inspiring to be able to see and to see the images and also see the words, right? This design for comfort, design for trust and safety and security. These are not conversations that we typically have or have had. So that's one way that I'll be using it as a source of inspiration. And I'll just say that this tool is not a checklist, it's not exhaustive, and it's really a call to rethink how mobility hubs can serve real people, right, and not abstract commuters. And it challenges us to go beyond traditional frameworks. For me, this thinking, I feel incredibly aligned because it's not new for me to plan for people outside of myself. It's how I've always approached transportation planning. So I'm happy to be in my community of some like-minded folks in the transportation space. We are working right now in East County in the Bay Area, where Emergent Labs is a part of a consultant team working with Tri-Delta Transit. And so we're working with them to help identify mobility hub locations and also doing conceptual design for them. And in doing that work, we started by asking who needs to be a part of the conversation. So that meant for us in that local context, prioritizing organizations that focus on youth and family services, food security, mental health, and housing justice, because those are the most pressing issues in that area. And so in that context, us working in East County, this is an incredible tool because women of color in that county sit at the intersection of all of many mobility challenges. And so we're definitely going to, in addition to the other sort of causes or issue areas that I've uplifted, this is also a complementary and supplementary tool that we'll be engaging with as well. So yeah, and it's not a checklist. It's not a checklist. It is not exhaustive. And I'll open it back up.
Yeah, and Brytanee, to add to that, if for anyone on the call who hasn't explored the full slide deck, go do that, because it's so much more than just the slides that were shared today. There are prompts for you to really engage with the community on, or with your stakeholders of that moment. And so you get to decide what's important, and with your stakeholders and your community. And so it's definitely something that you can always come back to and find something new that is intriguing and that you should definitely have incorporated into your work.
Thank you for reminding us of that, Jessica. I think that's something we perhaps should have said earlier in this meeting, that the presentation Benji and Natalia gave was sort of in a nutshell. There's a much longer version of the slide deck, and which is also giving you some material for that you could use in learning sessions or workshops or so. I also wanted to thank you for saying that this goes beyond mobility hubs, goes beyond transportation spaces. And I think that's also what we thought. We worked with the mobility hub not as a transportation space primarily, but as a public space, as in primarily urban, but this could also be translated into perhaps less urban or peri-urban spaces.
Yeah.
So I think it's interesting that you observe that, because I think we are urbanists, and we view the space as a public space. This is the point where we're not going to do any voting or anything, but it would really be nice to hear which design principle speaks to you the most. If you can make a selection or not, but just feel free. And that's also something for the audience, if you want to write in the chat which design principle speaks to you the most, and maybe with a short motivation. So so have you done any thinking about this? I think you're prepared for this question, aren't you? Otherwise it might be difficult to choose one of them. Brytanee?
Yeah, I think all of them speak to me because they can speak to many different women and caregivers. I guess if I'm gonna, since I do get the opportunity to, this gives me the space and invitation to plan for myself, actually. I'll speak for myself here and say that belonging speaks to me. Belonging and care speaks to me, to perhaps see arts, some cultural landmark that represents me and my community and my heritage, my cultural heritage, to see that at a mobility hub while I'm waiting for the bus or taking out a bike share would speak volumes and mean a lot. Having live music and, once again, art would be something that wouldn't be something that I imagine being a part of my transportation experience, but to be at a mobility hub and experience that, I think that piece speaks to me. But I think across the board, all of these are applicable for the communities in which I work with and the communities that I serve. So yeah, but all of them are fabulous.
Yeah.
Can't just choose one. I'll start with belonging and care. Yeah.
And it's funny because I chose the same one, and for the same reason. And what I wrote to myself is that so all of them are equally important, but if I had to choose, I would choose care and belonging, because once you've created a place that is welcoming and where you feel like you belong, you've accomplished many of these other principles around trust, security, convenience, and comfort. So it's so important that we create hubs that are reflective of and build on the good stuff in your neighborhood and district. And yes, there's more to it, right? And so we need to have the trust, we need to have the security and the safety. But I think if we can create that sense of belonging and care, then we've accomplished a lot already. And Sarah, beautiful share.
I was thinking about this question myself, actually, and I'm actually expecting my first child here soon, and I can't help but start really thinking about safety and health. I love taking public transit. I love cycling in Chicago, and I've never kind of had to think about it in this way. I've been thinking about, how I can take my little one around on my bike and where I'm going to feel comfortable doing that. What does that look like? And will I feel comfortable arriving at the train with them, late at night? And how does that look? So I think it's a fun time to be working on this project, really. So Hendrik, do we want to bring the other team members back in and open it up to some audience Q&A? Does that sound good at this point? And
yeah, I think it's the right point now.
Jessica, so far, we'll continue with some Q&A. So
we have a few questions or comments in the Q&A. So where do we want to start? Are there good examples of mobility hubs that could serve as models? Is there a city that has done this well? This is, of course, difficult to answer because maybe I think Benji, do you want to go on this? You look eager.
Yes. Yeah. So mobility hubs are actually just a new label. And it's a new label mostly for developed economies where the private car dominates and there's weak public transit. In many cities where there is good public transit or there's good popular transportation, there are natural mobility hubs that occur. So if you go to anywhere in the global south where there's a wet market, you will have a queue of auto rickshaws or tricycles or jeepneys or matatus nearby. Or if you go to any of the places where the minibuses congregate, like the stages of West and East Africa and South Africa, there will be vendors around these places. Or if you visit Tokyo, Tokyo has a lot of these shotengai, shopping streets that are directly connected and come out of the stations. So this idea of transportation should give you access to stuff. I think it's just a very North American and in some ways very European notion of this kind of engineered, you're separated from stuff, right? So the only thing this does is the thing it does. If you're getting off a train, you're just getting off a train. Well, Europe is doing it better and has been doing it better for a long time, particularly places like Copenhagen, Paris. The US is not yet there. But there's lots of, if we open our eyes, lots of places where these naturally happen. And what happens is actually we just prevent it. So I would cite those as examples. And yes, this question of how does it intersect with existing public amenities? It should connect to the existing public amenities, right? And it should come out and you should be in the library, or if you're coming out of the library or the park, it should be easy to access through all forms of transportation. Yeah, I could go on and on, so I'm going to stop.
Thank you, Benji. I'm picking up another question, and to say converging with existing spaces also relates to the question by Kim, or the comment and question of thinking back on early transit-oriented developments in the Bay Area. For the example of Fruitvale Station, how there were high hopes that the space would help all, but didn't quite seem to do this. And even the newer locations are lacking in being safe and accommodating. How might you reimagine spaces so that they can take on a new life and meet the framework of a mobility hub for women and families? I'll just have a first go on that, and then please feel free, everyone. I think one of the key principles, which is perhaps the eighth principle here, not one of the seven, but one key principle, is that we don't view this as design, which is something we deliver as a design, and then as a product. It's really design. Perhaps should be management of a place rather. So continuously managing the place, continue overseeing the place and the space, and so every year, every month, every week, have a view to see what's lacking, what perhaps needs to be adjusted or added. That because quite often, if we are, well, I'm sort of half architect, half engineer, and we were educated to produce things, produce designs, produce solutions, and then leave it sort of to somebody else to take care of. So I think that's one of the important principles here, how we could avoid having this rundown. Nobody takes care of places. Don't see the design as an end product. But feel free to comment, my colleagues here.
Yeah, I would add to Kim's question, investigation around what happened in TOD spaces in the Bay Area, if we're thinking about Fruitvale Station in particular, and how we might use this design framework. I think that perhaps there's an opportunity to do more community engagement and have a community engagement effort where we're starting with women and caregivers. I know the Fruitvale is largely Spanish speaking, so starting with Spanish speaking women and caregivers in that community to understand how that transit station is serving them, how it's not serving them. I think that, yeah, this gives us an opportunity to do that deeper level engagement. So for places and spaces that maybe have prescribed to some of the transportation frameworks that we've used historically, going back to those communities to understand what's working and what's not working. So, yeah.
If I might add to that too, I think this connects back to the use of personas, which is a tool that human-centered design uses, right? So then it asks you, how does the human actually experience the space rather than did we put the stairs, right? So as a simple example, when we design stairs, it's usually hidden off and there are no windows. That doesn't work for women because it feels very unsafe, right? And so things like that, I think is part of this. And the other thing we couldn't really put in because it's very contextual is exactly what Brytanee is saying, which is community-centered design. What is the community like? What are its assets? And then what are its needs, right? So that the engineering and the way we do modern design is very much, it could be anywhere and it just looks kind of different. But I think the approach here is to think about people and think about the community that it is serving, more so than what color are we going to use on the walls.
Great. We've got a couple more questions here. I'm gonna go to Catherine's here. She says, I really love the unspoken themes y'all have offered to help guide our thinking. I'm curious to hear the panelists' thoughts about how such themes can be applied to, used to facilitate conversations around encouraging community engagement and integration, given that so many of the cities that have been listed previously in the interactive activities were Chicago, LA, Detroit, etc., all of which are historically and currently racially segregated cities. Greater connectivity is amazing, but how do we leverage this tool in and throughout a city where vast sections may feel unsafe or unwelcoming to others? So really great question. Thank you, Catherine. Anyone want to hop in? Go ahead, Benji.
I think that's a fantastic question. And again, you can take the principles and contextualize it in the city. Chicago, where I am, right? We built the lines going south in the middle of highways, right? Because it was like, it's the easiest to do, which makes it very, very hostile. Because if you're waiting for your train, all you hear are the 12 lanes of highway passing by you. And so thinking about the comfort is really, really important. also thinking about what does it connect to, and paying attention to what people use and need is really important. I'm reminded of the lessons of Indigo, which is a bike share service in Philadelphia when they started rolling out. And the question they asked was, how would the underserved communities, how would it work for them, and what do they need? And they came up with a brilliant solution of, then maybe let's ask them. And they asked them, and to the people who are living in these communities, it's like, I don't take the bike to go to work. I want to take the bike to go to the park, or I want to take the bike to bike around the neighborhood. So your program of having 1 hour payment, that doesn't work for me. I maybe need 2 hours just to bike around. And when you build your bike lanes, I'm not going downtown. Can I get to church, right? And so it's part of that. It's really, and Lord knows we're so bad at it in the US in terms of urban planning for the long history of redlining and racism, right? And mobility hubs being one solution, or at least contributing to that, is part of I think, a good approach. And we intentionally represented people and talked to people who were marginalized.
Thank you, Benji. Natalia, do you want to hop into, and then Brytanee, maybe you also raised your hand before, maybe not, but I'll go Natalia first and then to you.
Yeah, just quickly, I wanted to add that at the bottom of the presentation, there's a bunch of prompts in shape of questions. And I think that can be a very useful tool to engage with community, just to ask those, maybe not exactly those questions we thought of them through, but also to come up with like this principle, and then come up with questions that then would open the inspiration for those whenever someone does community engagement, to how might questions really help to understand the diversity in terms of the needs of users. Because for someone, it could be, as Benji and Brytanee shared already, can be something, and then for other people with different perspective can be something else. So I think having these sort of like open workshops and using these prompt questions in which all perspectives converge can help to plan a sort of like community engagement workshop that tries to fill everyone and everyone's needs in.
Thank you, Natalia.
Yeah, I love that. And I love everything that's been said. And Catherine is at Emergent Labs, so her and I are going to have this conversation.
Yeah.
But I think it also comes from, like I said, the work that we're doing in East County that is suburban, but in the Bay Area context, you have a lot of people who are living in Oakland and in Richmond, and moved to East County because it's affordable, right? And so there's a convergence of communities, right? That's happening, and so I think that's what I'm picking up from this piece, from this question. But I'll just say that this tool, I think it can support with workshop planning, and and for me, it really speaks to the community engagement, who we're talking to, who we're centering and choosing to talk to first. It's a part of the planning, and so, I think for us, thinking about how to be very clear and explicit in the folks that we want to engage with, and really going back to thinking about that persona that is always surveyed and is always engaged with when it comes to transportation, and then to take that persona and flip it and say, okay, who might not ever see a flyer or see this posting about this community meeting, who's never gonna see this thing, who's gonna have the most difficulty in accessing this meeting at 6 o'clock on a Wednesday night, or 12 o'clock in the afternoon. Like, who's gonna have the most difficulty in making that happen? And how do we reach those folks in those communities to ask the questions that are in this framework? I think this framework and the way in which and planning for people it's an invitation, right? It's an invitation and it's a push to think about that. And I think, you know, I don't know if I don't think I've addressed that question at all. Benji, I think you did a really good job in doing that. But I think about, that piece of having the context and having local context is really important in thinking about the question that Catherine raised. And it can only be done through deep community engagement because every community is incredibly nuanced. So I'll open it back up.
Thank you. I'm really sorry to stop this discussion. It's so insightful, and but we're approaching the end of the webinar soon, not yet, but so I just wanted to thank Brytanee and Jessica for such interesting reflections and insights and such a lively discussion. Before we wrap up, we wanted to go back to our slide deck, the product of this product, and Natalia will give you some instructions for how to use it.
Yeah, we
over
just
to you, Natalia.
I just wanted to add, we just want to end with helping you, with those instructions of how to use the open source slide deck. So take it away, Natalia, to just kind of give everyone a really quick rundown of how we anticipated and we hope that you use it.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks, Jessica and Brytanee, for sharing your thoughts and for everyone in the chat being so active. We really appreciate your participation. So let's have a quick look at how the presentation looks. We developed a slide deck as our main deliverable. So we can go to the next slide, please. So the table of contents will help us guide us through the slide deck because it's quite a long product. So you can find here how to jump from the different sections as you might need them. So you can learn how to use the deck, find the instruction slides, presentation slides, or as I just commented, the workshop slides, which are a helpful tool if you want to workshop this topic with co-workers or also, community engagement. So we can see the slide sections and their use, which are color-coded in the next slide. So the blue slides are instruction slides, and slides which look like this will tell you the story of how the project team developed the principles. So it's a bit of the methodology, and these give instructions on how to use the deck. The slides that have fonts in black will present the personas, the principles, the guiding questions, and the inspirational illustrations, similar to what we presented today, but a bit with more context. And you can use these slides in your presentations and meetings. And lastly, we have the workshop slides with our fonts in yellow. And slides that look like this provide support, questions, and considerations around the principles. You can use these slides for further inspiration to brainstorm and foster conversations, as I said, with coworkers or for community participation. Next slide, please. And so the last point is how to use this deck. With the personas as your guide, you can dive into each of the principles in the succeeding slides, and the 7 personas will give us advice. They'll offer guiding questions that illuminate each principle. They'll show us some elements that demonstrate a principle and can prompt us to pursue other ways to meet their needs and concern. So these decks, the principles and the personas are meant to inspire, as we said throughout the presentation, and challenge. And it's not to diagnose and prescribe. So ultimately, you will need to consider your own context, as we said, and listen to the voices of women and caregivers in the communities that you're trying to serve. And I think for the last slide, that will be all. Whether you are, if we can go to the last slide, Karen, please. Whether you're a community leader, a designer, or an educator, we invite you to use these tools to drive change. Together, we can create transportation systems that truly work for everyone. And you can check on the QR code here the materials as as I said before, but you can also have them through the QR code. And we want to thank you very much for joining this webinar today. And we want to thank you again for your very active participation, both in the chat, in the polls, and the Q&A. Yeah, I don't know if Hendrik or Hannah want to add anything.
Yeah, just thank you all so much for joining, and thank you so much, Brytanee and Jessica. I know we rolled into the last few slides there, but just want to reiterate our gratitude for you guys joining us and sharing your expertise, and to the rest of the team. But thank you all for taking the time. We hope this is a useful tool for you as you continue to work in your communities.
Yeah,
Thank
and keep in
you.
touch with us. You feel free to give us any comments or any suggestions for improvements, whether on email or on LinkedIn or so. So we'll keep in touch, and yeah, we will share the recording of this webinar, of course. And have a great rest of the day. And from Living Cities and Communities in Sweden and Shared Use Mobility Center in the US, bye for now.
So beautiful. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
everyone.
Bye-bye.